Hello, hello.
Hey, hey.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. How's it going?
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for having us today. My name is Eunice Ajim, and I'm the founding partner at Ajim Capital. We are a US-based but African-focused early stage fund, and really excited to be here today with these panelists. So I'll let everybody else introduce themselves. Fola, you can go ahead and get started. Fola, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you, Fola.
Sorry, I missed the first bit. Sorry, do you mind? I think I was frozen for a second.
No, I was just saying, I gave a brief introduction about Ajim Capital, and I would like the panelists to go ahead and give a quick introduction about themselves. And I ask you to go first.
Okay, great. My name is Fola Olatunji-David. I'm founding partner at Kickoff Africa. Early stage investment into 25 plus deals over the last 1 year. I've been on the continent. I've also supported, a lot of UK investors looking to come into the continent, and I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. Felix, you want to go next?
Sure. I'll go next. Hey, everyone. Really good to be here. My name is Felix. I'm part of the investment team at Seedcamp. We're a London-based VC fund. As the name kind of gives away, we're a seed fund. We should actually be called pre-seed camp, to be honest, because we invest in more pre-seed stage companies than seed stage companies. But that's a detail. But yeah, we're investing in roughly kind of 35 to 40 new companies every year. We've been investing since 2007, so we're in our fifth fund currently. And yeah, we've just started investing in African companies and founders. So we've just backed Olu, who's up next. And yeah, I'm South African, which is part of the reason that I'm definitely super excited to, for us to be looking a little bit more at Africa, because it's obviously something that's close to me personally.
Awesome. I guess Olu, you can go.
Hi everyone, Olufunbi Falayi here. I'm a co-founder at Klump, also the chief product officer. Klump is a buy now pay later technology company. We offer flexible payment to businesses to offer their end users the opportunity to pay in installments. Right now, we're starting with marketplaces and then industry verticals like travels, education, and healthcare.
Awesome. Well, I think we're gonna go right in. Felix, Seedcamp, why Africa?
So let me just unmute myself. Yeah, why Africa? I mean, great question. I think part of it is very obvious, right? I think everyone in the world has woken up to the fact that there is a lot to do in Africa. We're thinking about it specifically through, whilst we are obviously still mainly focused on Europe, there are a couple of things like that we're thinking about. One is we think there are going to be some very, very large businesses that get born out of Africa, and they're going to be unique to African. It's like there's a class of new generation companies that we think are going to be very big, that the reason they're going to be very big is because they're uniquely African, right? And I can give you some examples of that, and I won't bias the conversation with talking about Klump, but yeah, there's certain opportunities that we think companies can go from A to C without having to go through B, and that's based on different dynamics around infrastructure, I guess, like social infrastructure as well. For us specifically, also the way that we're thinking about it is, we don't pretend to be experts on the market at all. We're still very much in the nascent phase of it and learning, and the way we're kind of learning is through doing. But obviously the way in which we're phasing out, coming into Africa specifically and being more active is by starting in verticals and kind of sectors that we maybe have more exposure to and that we've had exposure to historically. And so obviously consumer finance is one of them. We've been very active fintech investors over the years. And so, both investments that we've made in Nigeria are in kind of fintech. Obviously Klump and Klasha is another investment that we've made. yeah, I guess it's a no-brainer for us, and we are starting to move into that direction, and hopefully we'll be more and more active as the years go on.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I do want to remind the audience to please engage and send us any questions that you might have in the chat. We'll be sure to look at those questions towards the end of the session. So Olu, for you, I want to know, what is the value add for you having an internationally diverse cap, and how can that be leveraged? In the case of Klump, for example, was this a strategic decision, and if so, in what ways?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I know when we started this journey, the first commitment we had was the first validation was Fola, which is Kickoff Africa. First conversation, we got it, and then we had our commitment. But then we also knew that we wanted that diverse group, especially because the experience and the value of both parties are very different. For local investors, there's a depth of knowledge of the local knowledge of the country or the continent. And also, they bring a lot of regulatory landscape knowledge, which is very vital because fintech is one of the most regulated industries in the world. For us, bringing that local experience and also looking globally. Some of the things that we already knew from the jump was that international investors help, especially those with a lot of experience in the industry where we play, which is consumer financing. We knew, thinking about Seedcamp, their experience with, with Wise, with Revolut, we just knew it was a no-brainer. Once they showed up at the door, we knew it was a no-brainer. I wanted to leverage on that. And also, we know it was a credit business. It's a long-term game. You wanted you wanted an investor who's going to be there for you for the long haul, right? So for us, bringing that level of experience, and I would just say also that when we had our first conversation with Seedcamp, and then they agreed to invest, they put us in front of 80 investors, right? You can't get that anywhere. It was awesome. So for us, that's kind of what we think about. And then when we think about our next raise and our avenue for growth, we know they're going to be there for us. And that's how we think about international investors and the exposure to resources and scale.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I think this next question, any of you can go ahead and answer this. But when it comes to structuring and putting together a deal like this with international investment as well as local, how much does it affect the investment mechanism you're used to? And I'm asking, just with key consideration when it comes to putting deals together when it is a new territory. For example, Seedcamp, for you, you had only made one investment in Africa, and Klump was your second investment. So, actually, I put you on the floor, so you can go ahead and take up this answer.
Sure. And just to be clear on, just on the kind of question, you mean in terms of the actual structure of the deal, like you had an equity deal, like a convertible or whatever?
Yeah, so just the mechanism of having both local and international investment, was there a difference in putting that and structuring that deal and putting everything together?
Got it. To be honest, I'm interested to get Olu's take on it. From our side, not that much. It was a kind of standard. The way in which we do it is very lightweight. It's very standardized, regardless of the geography. Obviously, it helped that, for example, even just from like an incorporation standpoint, the Klump guys are incorporated in the US, and so you can just use standard safes and stuff like that. But then when it comes to the round composition, it kind of goes back to what Olu was saying around getting the ideal mix of local and international investors. Potentially the difference, I'd say, is that typically if it's like a European company that we see, and let's say it's a pre-seed round that we lead, we tend to be very hands-on in introducing them to specific people that can come around the table with us as part of that syndicate. Whereas now we're kind of more reactive to, we were very reactive to what Olu and Celestine were saying around like who they want around the table, acknowledging that we're not the experts around that, right? So that was maybe, I'd say, the one point of difference with maybe some of the other companies that we've invested in. It's like very much taking the lead from the founders around what the ideal composition looks like, and just making sure that we play nice with obviously all the kind of like people on the ground in Nigeria and so on. So I'd say that was probably the main difference.
Okay, awesome. Well, Fola, let's go right back to you. So Kickoff Africa is a newly launched fund with your international ecosystem
Yeah.
experience through past employers like Google and doing work between the UK and Africa. Is your fund taking a locally based, internationally based, or a blended approach to LPs in your fund?
It's pretty blended. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, there's a lot of local capital, but it helps. And to Olufunbi's point and to also Felix's point earlier, it helps when you offer startups that you invest in, you offer them an option to work with other LPs, because some of the LPs, especially the LPs at the super early stage, you find that they're more hands-on and they're more interested in how can we participate in further rounds. So it helps even your portfolio companies when you already have LPs that are also looking at investing. So yeah, I find, in fact, most funds on the continent, you'd be hard pressed to find any fund on the continent that is purely local. I don't think there is any.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar with the case, being like raising a fund myself in the US.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm curious is like, have you faced any challenges with raising money from either international LPs versus local LPs? Like, are there any, like common questions you get? Or like any setback, from LPs, in the, like internationally versus like local investors.
Yeah, well,
Do
I
you
think
have any?
the first thing, I've had some hesitancy, and again, I started raising smack in the middle of the pandemic. We didn't know if the world was going to exist again after that. But one thing about it is, I mean, I personally, and this might not be the case for most fund managers, but I started investing off of the GP commit, off of my money essentially. And so what that allowed me to do was I wasn't totally at the beck and call of my LPs. And so I was able to start investing. Sometimes investors or GPs are frustrated because they can't do a first close and they can't start to deploy. So essentially my first close was my money. So what it meant was by the time I was already talking to some LPs to come on board, and I guess that's also what the track record of working with other organizations, and Anthony can speak about this some more, and I know he has been, because I've been able to show that, look, I've worked with these funds before, I know how to do global best practices, and more importantly, I'm very helpful to founders. I think as fund managers, that's the biggest reputation you want to build, is being genuinely helpful to founders. It helps you even when you're trying to raise another fund, when you're trying to raise another round. So my experience has been a bit more skewed. But right now, even now, I'm still looking for LPs. So if you have LPs, let them come my way.
I think we're always looking for LPs, right? Awesome. Well, great question. So Felix, I'm going to go a little bit back to you. Given that Seedcamp is a European-based fund, right? And you guys have started slowly investing on the continent. What has it been like for your LPs? Have they been open to the idea of investing outside, I may say, of your thesis?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I think a couple of things. One is, I mean, on the whole, like short answer is yes. I think that they acknowledge the fact that we're closer to what's going on, like closer to the ground in terms of the action. And so I think there's an element of obviously trust that we've just, as a fund, been able to build up over the years. And so there's an element of if we start saying, look, guys, there's serious opportunities that we should be considering, let us consider them. I think yeah, I mean, there's weight in that. And just, I see there's a question around like, what's an LP? So an LP is essentially just the people that we raise money from. So it's people that invest in our funds and that we're obviously returning money to. And so there is an element of flexibility there. The other like disclaimer I would say is that, as I mentioned earlier, it's not that we've said, okay, let's drop our core strategy and drop everything we're doing and just triple down on African startups. It's very much a subset of what we're doing in all transparency. But again, in sectors that we feel that we have had exposure to and that we understand and that we can, connect founders that we've backed into. And so I think it's not like a all or nothing approach. It's very much let's start getting there. Let's start educating ourselves. Let's start building up the kind of like key infrastructure that we need to over the years and start investing, way more actively on the continent. And so from an LP's perspective, I think that's, they understand that.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that there haven't really been any pushback per se. It's like if you show them it's the right opportunity, and they can make a lot of money, which at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? It's a no bueno.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Oli, I'm going to ask you, I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to make sure we get straight to the point. But what is the difference? What differences have you seen between engaging and walking through the investment process with local investors versus overseas investors that are outside of the continent?
I mean, I'll try to be completely honest. Yeah, I mean, with local investors.
Careful what you say.
With local investors, there's a lot of focus on the valuation of the post-money safe. The instrument is the same, everybody gets it since it's safe. But with local investors, always negotiating on the valuation, and it's always sometimes very frustrating. But also, we also know the value of, like I said, of local investors, because we can't just scale. We can't scale locally without, local investors. It's just what it is. But with international investors like Seedcamp, they move very quickly, right? You see that a lot. And for us, with one or two conversations, we're in there already. And I think it also allows you to have access to equally, successful CEOs and of other fintech consumer-based startups in across the world, because that introduction is there. You have access to them. You get to learn from people like that. So having that conversation very early allows you to be able to differentiate, what you need from local investors, what you need from international investors, and how you can combine that together for long-term scale.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think valuation has definitely been a topic that I'm hearing a lot more across the continent as we've been looking at deals. I think it's a never-ending topic. I don't want to get into that because we could probably do the whole session on valuations right now. Awesome. Well, this is going to be literally for every one of us. So what appetite are you seeing from international investors and LPs to access opportunities on the continent? Felix, I'm going to start with you. Are you seeing other UK or European funds following suit or inquiring with you about opportunities in Africa?
Yeah, so definitely, I think, again, probably short answer is yes. I think, and you're seeing it across a bunch of different examples, right? You have certain funds, I don't know, like Partech, for example, in France, that have raised an Africa-specific fund. You've got Target Global, who are very kind of active in Rick, who's the partner there, who's kind of leading on most of their African investments. Entree Capital, who have been extremely active in the region. I think a lot of that ties back to their roots. I mean, you look at the Entree team, it's a fully South African team. So I guess they're more connections and stuff that they can leverage. And then of course you get the bigger heavyweights, right? There's the Tiger Globals of the world, not to be confused with Target, that are just have buckets of money that can, for them, everything is surrounding it. I mean, I don't want to speak badly of them because I think they've got an interesting strategy, but it's you're seeing them becoming way more active in the earlier stages, not just in Europe, but in Africa. And I think there's an element of what we've seen, the dynamic that we've seen between US investors coming to Europe in the last 2 years, with all the top funds coming up, setting up shop here, really competing at, I'd say mainly Series A, but increasingly coming kind of earlier and earlier down the stack. We often compete with multi-stage US funds at seed. I think there's an element of this leapfrogging that's happened where it's okay, well, we know that we can do that in Europe. we're going to start doing that in Africa as well, and let's start planting seeds and seeing what happens. So I think it's by no means everyone, but I think that whole movement has definitely started, and that comes with, you know, obviously some of the early like success stories on the continent, you know, the Paystacks and stuff of the world. I mean, there's that first generation of super successful tech companies that has come to the fore, and I think the implication of that, and we've seen it in Europe, right? Like the anecdote is, you had this like first wave of ultra successful European tech companies, like the Klarnas, the Spotifys, the UiPaths, the Skypes, and so on. And that was like the first generation. And then you had all the operators that helped build those companies. A lot of them would kind of like peel off and start their own companies, right? And then with that, that was the beginning of the virtuous cycle of more operating talent starting companies. With that came more money, more venture capital funds being raised in the region, US investors coming. And now in Europe, we're in that, like, I'd say we're in the third or fourth cycle of that. You know, taking Skype as an example, you had the first employee at Skype who was then the founder of TransferWise. Out of TransferWise, they're now, you know, 20, 30, 50 companies, however many it might be, of ex-employees that have started there. And so I think from a timing perspective, there's an element of that same thinking. People are like, okay, that's about to happen at real scale in Africa. And so I think that's what's kind of prompting okay, there's the perfect timing of talent, more capital, and there's going to be the virtuous cycle that takes off. So I think that's probably the flame that's igniting a lot of things.
Yep, that's so true. So true. Fola, for you, what does outreach looks like as of right now? I'm talking LPs, investors, founders, whatever.
Yeah. First of all, I think Felix did a fantastic job in, you know, capturing what the landscape really feels like right now. I will say it does in lots of ways. You know, the same way you feel as a European fund when a big US fund comes and sets up shop in Europe. That's how a lot of local VCs feel. And you know, because the funds are starting to play at lower levels, you know, and it's both ways. The rounds are getting increasingly large. I mean, I was looking at the average pre-seed round right now is hovering around 500 to $1 million. That's average. You know, a few years ago that was Series A, not even seed. You know, so I think for me, outreach, as we think about, you know, right now we're still in the founders market, and rightfully so. VCs have hovered a lot of power over founders. You know, 10 years ago, if you found a deal that offered you 20K for 20% of your company, a founder would jump at it. Right now, that wouldn't give you 1% in most pre-seed rounds. So I think outreach right now is finding that balance between founders who are building companies that are solving real problems. You know, there's also that fad and that craze of everybody wanting to be a founder right now. I think it's being able to balance, look, how do we, as part of our due diligence, do the founder due diligence and do the opportunity due diligence, making sure we're not just throwing money at the ecosystem because we want to, you know, spur it to growth and just say, hey, here's money, here's money, here's money. I think on the founder's path is also being able to be committed to an ecosystem thinking. You know, when we think about outreach and we think about, you know, the examples you gave from the you know, the Skype story to TransferWise to God knows the number of successful companies, we're starting to find this type of opportunities. You know, we're starting to find founders who were ex-Paystack, who were ex-OPay, who were ex-Flutterwave and InterSwitch and whatnot. But those founders need to be committed to also, you know, building and empowering their teams such that they can also start companies. And when they want to start companies, investing in them and connecting them to their investors. I think one of the biggest validation that a founder can get is if his former employer actually says, here are the people who invested in me. I would like to do an intro. And I've seen this, you know, in some of the funds that I've supported over the years. One of the investors, so I did some work with Ingressive Capital, and, you know, the founder at Ingressive Capital portfolio company said, you know, here's an employee that did good work, would like you to invest. And it was a good deal that we did. So I think for me, outreach is, you know, from the founder's perspective, also from the investor's perspective, and also finding some way to, you know, work collaboratively, which is why I really like programs like the UK Nigerian Tech Summit. because as much as you want to invest remotely, you still need boots on the ground, you know. And sometimes with the world that we live in, boots on the ground just means having a partner that you can trust their judgment in some of this way. So yeah, so that's, I think it needs to be an ecosystem way of thinking about this.
Awesome, awesome. And Olu, for you quickly, what does inbound look like in terms of just fundraising? Are you getting a lot of inbound, mainly from international investors, or you get enough, the same amount of inbound from local investors?
So in the beginning, when we started this journey, we had thought that a lot of the interest will come locally and from the US, but that wasn't the case. It was locally and from Europe, right? So that was kind of very surprising for us in the beginning. But once we announced the raise, we've seen a lot of US VCs reach out now, so that's beginning to change a little bit. But mostly in terms of inbound, while we were fundraising, it was more local in Nigeria and Africa, and then Europe, mostly the UK.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we are about to wrap up here, so I'm going to ask all of you to provide one piece of advice. Felix, for you, it will be, what is the one piece of advice you will give to any other funds looking to enter the African market?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to what Fola was saying around, like, the anecdote that I would have is around what's happened in Europe with US investors coming here and understanding like being empathetic of the sentiment of local investors, making sure that you are very, very collaborative with them. Like, don't try and come in and bulldoze, because it's just not going to work out. So yeah, I think again, like, I think collaboration is like it's like the bedrock of understanding the ecosystem better, which is what all investors that are coming from Europe or the US need to, like, prioritize, right? That's definitely how we're thinking about it. We're like, we don't pretend to be experts in this, and so the way we want to try and position ourselves is like, yeah, let's try and get as embedded as we can within the local ecosystems, be as collaborative as possible, understand that there's a huge amount of value in that, educate ourselves, and then kind of take it from there. So I'd say, yeah, probably something along those lines.
Awesome, awesome. For you, Fola, what is the one piece of advice for other local African investors, looking to work with international collaborators or, other funds?
I guess for me is look, builders build, shippers ship, investors invest. As much as you want to, a lot of people are just comfortable with tag investors and they're being stingy with their capital. I think rather than looking for that silver bullet of that deal that's going to do magic for your portfolio, I think people need to take more chances on founders and just invest based on obviously with the right frameworks and the right checks and balances in place, but just invest. I think our job as investors is finding the right founders and supporting them through the ups and downs of their journey. And the more you do your work, the more the inbounds will come, and also communicate with other people through programs like this, and you find meaningful relationships. But invest, yeah, not just by title,
awesome.
To actually invest.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Well, Olu, for you, what is the one piece of advice to other African startups, looking to bring in both international as well as local VCs?
Now, I would say that the one thing that stood out during our journey was the industry experience. Celestine and I just having that experience in the fintech space, thinking about Celestine's experience in Akonga, Andela and Paystack, and then my experience at Amazon and HEB was significant. And I think just understanding, the industry vertical way you're playing and being able to communicate that very articulately, in a very articulate manner was very critical. And I would say that that's what all founders need, just to be able to understand the industry and show expertise in the industry.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. This was an amazing panel. Thank you, Felix, Fola, and Olu for the words of wisdom. Anthony, back to you.